In the early days of analog horror, stray vibrations and accidental murmurs often slipped into the reel's imperfections no one noticed until curious listeners began reversing the tape. What they found were not glitches, but patterns. Faint breaths disguised as static, distorted syllables woven into music, and strange pulses that felt almost deliberate. Some filmmakers denied involvement. Others offered uneasy smiles, as though they knew more than they would say. These backward messages didn't just accompany the films, they reshaped them, turning ordinary scenes into cryptic warnings. Tonight, we revisit 15 horror films whose most unsettling revelations hide not in what you see, but in what the soundtrack whispers when time runs the other way. Fact 1. The Beyond, 1981. The Beyond stands as a gateway between worlds, drenched in surreal dread and dreamlike terror, yet its most haunting passage isn't visual, it vibrates quietly beneath the score. In scenes where the veil between dimensions thins, a delicate overtone flickers through the upper frequencies, almost too faint to notice. Played forward, it sounds like shimmering tension, a musical shimmer on the edge of breaking. Reversed, it transforms into a layered moan that rises unevenly before dissolving into whispered consonants shaped like the beginning of a word that never fully forms. Audio engineers revisiting restored elements were baffled. The sound doesn't appear in the isolated music or effects recordings, suggesting bleed-through from an early experimental track once intended to represent the dead. Some believe this fragment was partially erased during mixing, leaving only its ghost behind. Listeners who study the reversed audio often report an uncanny sensation that the sound isn't coming from within the film, but from just over their shoulder, as though the unseen world depicted in the Beyond is quietly reaching outward. The reversed whisper becomes a message from a dimension pressing against our own, audible only when time is moved against itself. Fact 2. Bloody Birthday, 1981. Bloody Birthday hides its cruelty beneath the bright faces of childhood, and the film's reversed audio anomaly deepens that unsettling contrast. During scenes where the three young killers silently coordinate their next move, a faint, rhythmic flutter pulses under the soundtrack, barely noticeable unless isolated. Forward, it resembles the mechanical wobble of old equipment. Backward, it reveals a disturbing cadence that echoes the bouncing rhythm of a playground chant. Some listeners claim to hear fractured syllables buried within the reversed pattern, as though names or commands were being repeated in a corrupted form. Although the composer denied using any vocal elements, a former sound assistant recalled early experiments layering children's voices into test cues intended to suggest innocence turned sour before the idea was ultimately scrapped. Whether those remnants lingered in the analog tape or emerged from overlapping frequencies, the reversed sound syncs too perfectly with the children's presence to ignore. Fans often describe the effect as eerily playful, like the ghost of a rhyme whispered by a child who no longer remembers the rules of the game. It transforms the film's violence into something ritualistic, as though the kids are guided not just by malice, but by a darker rhythm only the tape reveals. Fact 3. Mausoleum 1983. Mausoleum presents its demonic inheritance through vivid transformations. Yet its most unsettling detail isn't visual, it's a sound that seems to gasp beneath the score. During scenes where the curse seizes hold of the protagonist, a thick, throbbing drone rises from the lower registers, blending seamlessly with the musical arrangement. Played normally, it feels like a dissonant foundation designed to heighten tension. But when reversed, the drone breaks apart into staggered bursts of breath, sharp and irregular, as though someone is struggling through a transformation that the body cannot contain. Audio specialists examining isolated tracks found no evidence of a recorded vocal layer, implying that the anomaly formed only when music, effects, and ambience were woven together. Some rumors suggest an abandoned audio experiment once attempted to give the demon a vocal signature, but if so, only faint traces survived. Fans who isolate the reversed breathing often describe an unexpected note of desperation, less a roar of power and more a gasp of pain. It reframes the possession not as domination, but as torment, giving Mausoleum's horror a tragic undertone buried just beneath the film's sonic surface. Fact 4. The Incubus 1981. The Incubus surrounds its small town with unease, but the film's most enigmatic element hums beneath the soundtrack like a heartbeat out of sync. In scenes where the entity's unseen presence stalks the characters, a trembling pulse vibrates beneath the mid-range frequencies, rising and falling as though breathing. Played forward, it feels like an anxious drone, Reversed, it morphs into a halting respiration punctuated by faint, clicking consonants that resemble the beginnings of speech. Sound engineers examining the old mixes were unable to trace the anomaly to any specific track music, ambient, or effects. Some speculate it originated from an abandoned attempt to create a sonic identity for the entity, a vocal layer meant to be removed but never fully erased. What stands out most is how the reversed pattern syncs with moments of dread, as though the presence in the film is inhaling with the characters, waiting for the right moment to manifest. Rather than portraying the entity as distant and supernatural, the reversed audio makes it unnervingly intimate, something close enough to share breath with its victims, audible only when the real unwinds. Fact 5. The Boogeyman 1980. The Boogeyman treats its supernatural threat as a reflection of past sins, but the film's most fragile ghost hides in the mirror's audio footprint. Whenever the cursed mirror asserts its influence, a tremulous overtone shivers beneath the score, wavering just enough to unsettle the ear. Forward, it feels like a discordant note. Reversed, it unfolds into a soft, looping murmur shaped like a lullaby that has lost its melody. No vocal textures appear in the composer's documentation, and the production's audio logs mention nothing unusual. Yet, an obscure reel labeled as ambience contains a short vocal test, suggesting part of it may have bled into the final mix. What strikes listeners most is the reversed lullaby's emotional weight. Instead of sounding malevolent, it carries an aching tenderness, as though the mirror holds something both trapped and yearning. Fans describe the sound as a voice pressed against glass, humming for recognition from within its prison. The Boogeyman's terror is usually external, a force reaching outward. But this hidden lullaby turns it inward, a quiet cry from whatever cannot escape the mirror's surface. Fact 6. Don't Go in the House 1979. Don't Go in the House explores trauma as a lingering presence, and that same presence seems to seep into the film's audio. During moments when Donnie wanders through the scorched remains of his home, a faint, metallic shimmer flickers beneath the soundtrack, a jittery sound so fragile it could pass for damaged equipment. But reversed, the shimmer tightens into a strained sequence of compressed syllables, eerily reminiscent of someone whispering through clenched teeth. The isolated music tracks contain no trace of it, suggesting the anomaly formed only in the final composite mix. A former crew member once hinted toward early experiments with whispered overlays meant to echo Donnie's abusive past, though he insisted they were abandoned. Yet something lingers, something sharp, intimate, and uncomfortably close. Fans who isolate the reversed sound often describe the same feeling, a reprimand rising from behind the listener's ear, a scolding presence Donnie can never escape. In this version of the film, the house does more than trap memories, it speaks them, breaking through the soundtrack only when time itself is rewound. Fact 7. Death Ship 1980. Death Ship anchors its horror in rusted metal and forgotten atrocities, but the vessel's most chilling resonance comes from a sound few noticed until enthusiasts began reversing the film's audio. Deep within the ship's lower decks, a metallic drone underlies the ambient creaks, a resonance that blends so seamlessly with the environment it's easy to dismiss. Played normally, it echoes the groan of tired steel. Reversed, it takes on the unsettling cadence of breath, forced through constricted lungs, slow and deliberate, as if something immense were inhaling behind the walls. Some collectors claim that a sound designer once toyed with reversed vocal layers to give the ship a ghostly identity, though no official records confirm this. What is clear is how the anomaly seems tied to the ship's haunted past. The reversed breathing becomes more pronounced during sequences referencing earlier violence, as though the vessel itself remembers. Fans often describe the sound as patient, a presence that has been waiting in the dark far longer than the characters realize. In Death Ship, the terror isn't just that spirits may inhabit the vessel, it's the suggestion that the ship itself is alive, exhaling quietly through the corridors when the reel runs backward. Fact 8. The Unseen 1980. The unseen builds dread through what it hides, but its most revealing clue lies buried in the vibrations underneath its soundtrack. In several basement scenes, a trembling hum threads through the ambient noise, low, unstable, and strangely organic. Forward, it resembles machinery struggling in darkness. Reversed, it unfurls into a mournful wail that collapses into a rasping exhale, a sound so human it startles even seasoned listeners. The surviving mix notes identify no vocal sources, only conventional orchestration, making the anomaly difficult to explain. An assistant editor once offered a theory. Perhaps an early version of the score briefly included a vocal texture intended to reflect the unseen figure's tortured nature, later removed but never fully erased from the tape. Yet, what listeners note most is not the sound's origin, but its emotional alignment. The reversed wail seems to match the creature's movements, almost breathing with him, as though the soundtrack itself bears witness to his suffering. Rather than amplifying terror, the anomaly deepens it by introducing empathy, suggesting the monster is not simply a threat, but a wounded being whose pain pulses through the film's very frequencies. Fact 9. The Nesting, 1981. The Nesting wraps its protagonist in a suffocating solitude, but its most plaintive voice belongs to something hidden deep within the film's soundscape. Throughout scenes where she wanders the house's creaking floors or pauses beside shuttered windows, a faint hiss lingers beneath the music, too thin to register as anything more than environmental noise. Yet when played in reverse, the hiss reshapes itself into a wavering moan, uneven and fragile, as though someone were struggling to speak across a great distance. Audio stems from the production contained no such vocal layer, leaving archivists to conclude the sound must have been picked up unintentionally on set. But the reversed moan behaves with unnerving precision. It swells during moments tied to the house's buried tragedies and softens in scenes where the character briefly feels safe. Fans who study the anomaly describe a sorrowful resonance as if the building itself remembers the women who once suffered within its walls. Instead of manifesting as a traditional haunting, the reversed sound feels like grief echoing from the past, a whispered lament carried on the house's decaying breath. It gives the film's isolation a chilling tenderness, turning simple silence into a quiet plea. Fact 10. Evilspeak 1981. Evilspeak channels its terror through old technology, but its most unsettling artifact lies buried beneath the computer's low electronic hum. In scenes where the protagonist interacts with the machine, a distorted pulse flickers under the audio, almost rhythmic, almost speech. Played forward, it resembles malfunctioning circuitry. Reversed, it mutates into a jagged blend of harsh exhalations and fractured syllables, like a voice clawing its way through corrupted data. Early technicians blamed the resonance on poor acoustics in the Academy's basement, but a later transfer engineer described the reverse signal as something trying to push through the wires. Disturbingly, the anomaly appears only during scenes tied to the computer's darker influence, never in neutral moments. This has led many to speculate that an abandoned vocal layer or an overdriven sound effect may have imprinted itself onto the tape. Fans who analyze the reversed audio speak of a presence that feels uncomfortably aware, responding to the scene rather than sitting beneath it. In Evilspeak, the horror isn't just that a machine can summon evil, it's that the machine may already be speaking, its true voice only audible when time is forced backward. Fact 11. The Hearse 1980. The hearse surrounds its heroine with grief, superstition, and a quiet dread that follows her home. Yet the film's strangest echo comes from the hearse itself, a steady hum beneath the engine that doesn't behave like machinery. Under normal playback, the sound blends seamlessly with ambient noise, but reversed, the hum lengthens into a wavering chant, rising and falling with ritualistic rhythm. Engineers who re-examined the film's audio years later admitted they encountered ghost frequencies while mixing, vibrations that appeared even when the engine was silent. Though no vocal effects were documented, listeners consistently report a layered cadence, faint but unmistakable. Even more curious is how the reversed chant intensifies during scenes where the vehicle's presence grows oppressive, almost as if the car carries an unseen passenger whispering beneath the metal. Whether an accidental acoustic phenomenon or an uncredited experiment, the effect reimagines the hearse as more than a symbol of death. It becomes an unwilling messenger, murmuring secrets from whatever rides inside it, secrets that only reveal themselves when the tape runs backward. Fact 12. The Black Room 1982. The Black Room builds its tension through stillness and secrecy, yet the film's most persistent watcher may be an unseen voice woven into the soundtrack. In moments where the camera lingers on dim corners or half-lit hallways, a thin rasp surfaces beneath the synth score, so faint it feels accidental. But when reversed, that rasp organizes itself into a staggered sequence, resembling a slow, deliberate count. Archivists comparing different releases noticed the anomaly repeating with uncanny uniformity, ruling out random tape damage. Rumors from early production hint at discarded sound experiments meant to evoke the obsessive gaze central to the film, though no official documentation supports this. What unnerves listeners is how naturally the reversed cadence syncs with moments of anticipation, as if the house itself is marking time while watching its inhabitants. Fans who isolate the anomaly describe the sensation of being timed, of someone waiting, patient, and motionless, just out of view. The Black Room's audio ghost doesn't taunt or warn, it simply counts, as though preparing for something only it understands. Fact 13. The Redeemer, Son of Satan, 1978. The Redeemer, Son of Satan, is saturated with ritualistic imagery, yet its most cryptic invocation hides behind a low rumble threaded through the preacher's scenes. The sound seems innocuous until reversed, when it unravels into a stilted cadence resembling the remnants of a broken chant. Some listeners hear reversed Latin syllables, others detect echoes of the preacher's own tone, distorted into something mournful. Surviving production notes make no mention of reversed vocal layers, and interviews with crew members suggest no intentional experimentation. However, collectors claim that an early assembly cut contained a clearer, more rhythmic version of the same pattern, implying it may have been partly masked during later mixing. The emotional quality of the reverse chant is what lingers. It doesn't feel aggressive, but weary, like a trapped voice repeating a confession long forgotten. As the film blurs divine judgment with human cruelty, this hidden resonance becomes a kind of spectral commentary, pulsing beneath the surface like a buried sermon waiting to be unearthed. Fact 14. Night School, 1981. Night School dresses itself in urban grit and quiet menace, but hidden beneath its final chase lies a sonic signature that refuses to fade. A faint flutter pulses under the score, subtle enough to be dismissed as artifact. Yet reversed, the flutter lengthens into a soft, wavering tone marked by what sounds like a child's voice caught between breaths. Archival sound stems offer no trace of added vocals, causing editors to suspect an ambient recording may have bled into the mix. But what fuels speculation is the seeming precision of the anomaly. It appears only during moments when fear peaks, as though responding to the tension on screen. In a rare interview, the composer skirted around the subject, remarking only, "Old tape remembers things we forget." Fans who've analyzed the reverse sound describe an eerie innocence tinged with sorrow, more like a lost voice seeking attention than a threat. It introduces a spectral counterpoint to an otherwise grounded thriller, hinting at a presence that watches from just outside the frame, speaking only when the reel spins backward. Fact 15. The Sender, 1982. The Sender opens with a man rescued from the edge of death, yet the film's most unnerving disturbance isn't his telepathic ability, it's the subtle voice that seems to accompany him. During post-production, engineers noticed slivers of sound that didn't correspond to any actor's lines. Played forward, they were barely more than trembling air. Reversed, they stretched into a monotone murmur, faint but shaped with intention. Some listeners insisted they heard a command, others a plea, though no two interpretations matched. Early, unfinished cuts reportedly contained even clearer fragments, suggesting the phenomenon existed before the soundtrack was finalized. What unsettled technicians most was how effortlessly the anomaly blended with the film's mood, echoing the protagonist's intrusive thoughts as if the reel itself absorbed them. Those who've experimented with the reversed audio describe a pulse beneath the whisper, something steady, almost human. Whether a relic of reused tape, an abandoned experiment, or something stranger, The Sender leaves viewers with the sense that the film is whispering back, revealing a truth only audible when the world rewinds. Bonus film, Let's Scare Jessica to Death 1971. Let's Scare Jessica to Death floats between psychological unraveling and supernatural dread, and the film's most fragile secret hides in the softest layer of its soundscape. During moments when Jessica wanders the lakeside or sits alone in the quiet farmhouse, a nearly imperceptible ripple trails through the ambient noise, too subtle to distinguish from wind or shifting water. But when played backward, that ripple reveals a trembling murmur shaped uncannily by the rhythm of Jessica's breathing. It never forms complete words. Instead, it presses forward like a thought struggling to materialize, dissolving just before it becomes intelligible. Production notes document no effort to incorporate reversed vocals, and the director maintained that the sound design relied on minimalism to reflect Jessica's fraying mental state. Yet the anomaly behaves with eerie intentionality, intensifying in scenes where her doubt peaks and retreating when clarity briefly surfaces. Some argue it is merely environmental noise distorted by analog recording, while others believe it represents an early, uncredited attempt to sonically express Jessica's internal collapse. To those who isolate the reversed audio, the murmur feels uncomfortably personal, less an external haunting, and more a voice rising from within her own mind, speaking only when the flow of time is reversed. If these echoes have followed you to the end, remember this: not every voice belongs to the living, and not every message was meant to be heard forward. If the hidden sounds beneath these films stirred something in you, you're welcome to stay with us as we unravel more shadows buried inside cinema's forgotten corners. There are still whispers tucked between the frames, waiting for someone curious enough to reverse the reel and listen.